How's it, guys? It's been a pretty busy week. Well, let's get into it. Where were we? Chapter 7. Got your cup of tea. Cheers. Rooibos tea. Right. According to the boffins, elephants have 33 audible recognizable noises that they make. Among these are what we would mistakenly call the stomach rumbles. They're actually throat rumbles, but for generations people have called it stomach rumbling, and it's hard to get out of the habit. Then there are the infrasonic sounds they make, and there is no way of knowing the number of words they have there. Johnny Osborne tells me of culling elephants in the Triangle Sugar Estates, and elephants 60 kilometers away somehow got the message and were not walking. They were running for the Gonarejo National Park, where they knew they'd be safe. Body language plays a big part of elephant communication, as with humans. In female herds, the matriarch rubs her ears against her shoulders as a let's go signal. If an elephant has its trunk draped over its tusk, it's a sign of reassurance. You can tell if an elephant is angry, hostile, or indecisive, and if they are going to mock charge or if it's for real. I believe that if you survive your first elephant charge, you are lucky. If you survive the third charge, you are already a professional. All my elephant observations have been done on foot without a weapon. And so it was a terrifying experience the first time I was charged. I noticed a female all on her own out in the middle of a field of adrenaline grass. I thought she might be sick, but to be sure, I made my friends Erwin Staples and George Wannenberg stay behind some acacias while I walked over closer to have a look. From 70 meters away, she charged, ears folded, head down, and trunk tucked in. I took off to the closest anthill, which was about 50 meters away, and knew there was no ways I would make it before she got there. When I heard her close behind me, I threw my hat up in the air. It gave me a split second as she swung her trunk towards the hat. Then on she came. Next was my t-shirt, and then I made the anthill. She followed me around the anthill only twice and then stopped, swung her foot back and forth a couple times, a sign of indecision, and then walked off. It was only then that I saw the bullet wound in her neck and dried blood all the way down to the bottom of her chest. Owen came out from behind the acacias and suggested a retake, as he had forgotten to take photos during the excitement. Yeah, well, that's the problem with poachers. Is that they often use insufficient caliber to try and kill the elephants and just end up wounding them, you know. That makes them very irritable. Stretch Ferreira recently told me of a story of blatant elephant body language. He was killing time in Mana pools between his canoe safaris. A young South African lad wanted a picture of an elephant. He had already come up to Stretch and told him that an elephant had passed close to his vehicle. Stretch, being who he is, offered to take the lad to get a good picture. He could see that the bull was headed in a definite direction, so they went over and sat down next to where the bull would pass. But the bull changed direction and came steadily straight for Stretch and his visitor. "Don't move," warned Stretch to a terrified lad. Pretty soon the bull was standing right over them, and with its front foot made moving aside movements, as if to say, "You're in my way, move over." Stretch took the lad's arm, and they moved just far enough and then sat still again. The elephant passed not more than inches from the lad, who never got his picture, but plenty of others did. Yee, that's risky. That's foolishness, I tell you what. I wouldn't do that. Recently I spent 3 months in Portland, Oregon, visiting Mom and Dad. During this time I made contact with Dr. Betts Rasmussen, the guru of elephant chemistry. She is also a biochemist and molecular biologist with the Oregon Graduate Institute. Before going to see her, Mom wanted to inspect me. "You're going to see someone dressed like that?" she asked. I went off with Mary Buns, and together we met Betts. She swims an hour every morning and must be about 60. She was warm, dressed in an old, comfortable jersey and jeans, and made us very welcome. I had tried in the past to make contact with other elephant researchers, and it basically had been snubbed on every turn. But within half an hour, we felt like we had been part of Bet's family all of our life. She taught us how elephants communicate chemically as well as audibly. One of the most exciting things she taught us was how the Indian male elephant tells whether a female is an estrus. He puts his trunk down to smell her urine. Elephant urine has a high level of albumin, which carries the pheromones. The pH, or acidity, of their urine is 8.5. The male drips a clear liquid with a pH of 6 into the urine of the female, reducing the pH to a level of 7.25, which is the level needed for the albumin to release the pheromones. By smelling the pheromones, he is able to tell whether she is ready to be mated. Of course, we couldn't wait to see whether the African elephant was the same. We watched as musth bulls came into a herd of female elephants. With this one particular bull, we watched as he smelled the female's urine. Watching closely, we noticed tears coming from the bull's trunk. We have also noticed that the bull often puts his trunk directly into the female's vulva, which would lead one to think that the tears are not the same as the Indian elephants. Later on, we saw another bull in musth, far away from any water, and he appeared to be playing with a vine. As he dangled his trunk in a loop of the vine, what appeared to be tears also came out of his trunk. In speaking with several guides, they too have noticed tears coming out of the bull's trunks when smelling a cow's urine. As the musth patterns in the Indian and African elephant are so similar, the releasing of pheromones is likely to be the same as well. This would be a great research project for someone that way inclined. I'm currently in my last year of undergraduate study of zoology, considering going into doing a master's degree, and I was thinking of doing my master's thesis on elephants. That could be something to consider. Maybe when I publish it, I'll write to Mr. Bill Taylor and say I did the research. So I'd love to meet him. Apparently, a friend of mine knows him, knows where he lives. I'd love to meet him one day. The first quarter at Dental University was terrifying. After a week, I went in desperation to see Dad's friend, kindly old Dr. Smith, telling him about my problems of not being able to read. He had also had problems with dyslexia, and so started right in on how to get by the studies. Every afternoon when classes were finished, I would go to his office in the anatomy building, and he would exercise my brain. He would put a few articles on a table and have me look at it for a few seconds, then cover it with a cloth. I would have to tell him everything that was on the table, the position it lay on the table, and every detail of the object. The results were satisfying. I had thought that I was good at noticing things before, but now I noticed everything. Then Dr. Smith taught me how to take multiple choice exams. If it was a long, involved answer, you knew it was false. If the answer had the words always or never in it, then you knew it was false. That's especially in science. If you had no clue, always choose C, as that is the letter examiners like the most. To prove that he was right, he had me go and take the exam. In neurology with the medical students the following day. I not only passed, I got a C grade in a class I had never taken. He gave me confidence to go to class, and just listen, learning from what the professor said. He may have given me a little too much confidence, however. Our histology class was taught by Dr. Harold Shryock, a white-haired, dignified old gentleman. One of my classmates told me that he had written a book called On Becoming a Man, which was a book for teenagers to teach them about the birds and bees. I thought he might appreciate it if I helped him a bit. We had blackboards that slid up and down. The professor would write and fill up the lower blackboard, and instead of wasting time cleaning off the blackboard, he would reach up and pull the top blackboard down and continue on writing. I got a hold of a couple of Playboy magazines and took out the pin-ups. I pulled down the top blackboard and taped them to the board behind and wrote On Becoming a Man underneath the pictures, then pushed the blackboard back into position. Histology the next day held the promise of a very interesting lecture. I was more attentive than usual, sitting in the front row so as to not miss a thing. Dr. Shryock busily filled the lower blackboard, then reached up and pulled the top blackboard down and kept writing. He was so close to the board that he didn't even notice the pin-ups, but the rest of the class did. There were hoots, cheers, and a lot of sniggering. Dr. Schreier couldn't figure out why everyone was carrying on until our class president, Roger Platter, pointed to the pin-ups. He stepped back, took one look, and turned white with rage. He stormed out of class, shouting that he refused to ever teach a bunch like us, and slammed the door. Roger ran after him and assured him that it wasn't our class. The medical students were the ones that did things like that, but we would never do that to him. I wasn't in a position to tell him any different, but there were a couple others who knew the truth. An idea formulates. Then it was time for clinic. I knew that my communication skills were bad and predicted a lot of interesting times ahead. An instructor could ask you any questions he wanted to about dentistry, could check your instruments, and for each filling completed, there were 4 steps that had to be signed off. This meant that if an instructor didn't like you, you were finished. I had previous experience on how to fit in with a herd of elephants, so used the same principles. With the elephants, I didn't want to smell out of place, so I smeared myself with elephant dung, as Paka had taught me. I picked an instructor, looked at how he was dressed, and the next time I was on the clinic floor, I had on checkered polyester, bell-bottom pants, white leather square-toed shoes, and my white clinic smock. We looked like brothers. When I went up to him for the first time, he looked me up and down, smiled, and we were friends from that moment on. But I did cause him some embarrassment a time or two. That's the funny thing. It's quite a common meme on the internet. It's like if 2 girls are wearing the same thing, then they like hate each other's guts. But if 2 guys are wearing the same thing, instant friends, straight away. Psychology of the sexes. In front of the other instructors, he asked me, "Bill, do you know what Ludwig's angina looks like?" "Yes," was all I replied, not sure that I heard right. "What's it look like?" he persisted. "Well, I imagine it looks just like my wife's," I said and turned and walked away. My instructor's face was red, and the other instructors were laughing uncontrollably. I quickly went and asked a classmate what Ludwig's angina was, and then it was my turn to have a red face. Angina is pain in the heart from a restricted blood flow. Yeah, we made that joke a lot when I was at paramedics, I tell you. I can still recall my time spent on the clinic floor and the patients I had. Knowing body language, I was able to pick patients who would participate in the events of my life, not direct them. I also discovered nitrous oxide. We used it routinely for children. One day, in showing a child what I was going to do, I turned on the nitrous and took a deep breath straight out of the pipe, held it for 3 seconds, and then started talking to him. I sounded exactly like Donald Duck. We both laughed so much that he tried it, both of us ending up having a wonderful time. So, when I had an anxious patient, I would wheel over the nitrous tank when no one was looking and have them take a snort of nitrous. No one can be anxious or stressed when they are talking like Donald Duck. But the books were a bind. I had a wonderful helper in the way of a black Labrador who complimented me on every piece of work I did, set a good example with her good behavior, kept me fit by running me every day, and sat faithfully with me through most of my lectures. Oh, that's lovely. I had her since she was a puppy, and she very nearly broke up my marriage the first week I was married. My wife hung out her brand new wedding lingerie on the wash line, and what the dog didn't eat, she tore up and buried. Next thing I knew, I had an irate woman coming down on my head. "Either the dog goes, or I go," she said. Well, the dog is staying, and I recommend you work things out with her, because I think they have quite a long lifespan. They did work things out, but Shenzi, which means uncivilized heathen in Swahili, was my constant shadow. Huh. So there's that one hyena from The Lion King, the female hyena. It's called Shenzi, uncivilized heathen. Didn't know that. It was like having two women in the house, the one always being jealous of the other. When I sat next to my wife on a step, Shenzi would try and sit between us, which amused both of us. I taught her to climb trees, climb ladders, sit, stay, lie down, and all the dumb tricks dogs do. We were required to wear ties at dental school, but I had the dog wear my tie. The dog would sit in a chair next to me and would pay the closest attention to the professor. One day, the dean of the school stuck his head in the classroom and noticed the dog sitting in the seat next to me. "Get that dog out of here," he shouted. "Ah, please let her stay," pleaded the professor. "She's the only one that ever stays awake and actually pays attention." So Shenzi got to stay. When I started clinic, I had to leave her at home in the backyard. I'd come home about 6 in the evening, and there would be Shenzi, sitting on top of the roof. She had climbed a ladder leaning against the back of the house and was waiting for me. She was definitely a watchdog. She was also a kleptomaniac of note. Her passion was Vienna sausages, and as I could barely afford to feed her dog food, she would go down to the 7-Eleven, wait for someone to open the door, then she would race in, grab a packet of Viennas, and come racing for home. In the backyard, she would gently take the plastic wrapper off and eat them one by one. She also stole shoes. Never pairs, only singles. And I had 23 different shoes in my garage, waiting for the owners to come and claim them. From the 7-Eleven, she also stole 2 Bowie knives, still in their leather sheaths. Dog dishes, bags of dog food, brooms, and toys were all part of what she brought home. Yet no one ever came to claim any of the goods, and it was hard getting an answer out of her as to where she had gotten the goods. I didn't realize that America, being the land of the free, would have restrictions on dogs, and so I took Shenzi with me to Yosemite National Park. Exactly. Oh, it's so bizarre. Like, I've never I've never felt more restricted in my life than when I came to America. Which is so bizarre because they always tout the land of the free, personal freedoms, what. But honestly, like, got more freedom back home because, I mean, if there are laws against something, there's no one really enforcing them. So there's very few restrictions that are actually practically exist in Zim. No one really cares what you're doing as long as you don't upset anyone else. Anyway, so he took Shenzi with him to Yosemite National Park. When we saw a warden, I would take her behind a bush and tell her to stay, which she would do until I called her. I believe she is the only dog who ever climbed Half Dome. When we came back from our hike, the family set out the blanket behind the car and prepared a picnic. Shenzi and I were enjoying the view, which was spectacular, when we heard a shout. Thinking it was time for lunch, I ran back towards the car, wondering why everyone was sitting inside the car. Shenzi and I both burst around the back of the car together to find a brown bear sitting in the middle of the blanket, eating an egg and mayonnaise sandwich. I suppose most people, like my wife and her parents, would back down from a 400-pound bear. But for someone who had spent years with elephants, hippos, buffaloes, and lions, a brown bear was nothing. Besides, I had momentum and surprise on my side. Scooping up a fallen branch without skipping a step, I swung, connecting the bear on his upraised paws. Shenzi was around the back, pulling out chunks of hair. The bear was shocked by this assault and decided there were easier ways of getting a meal, running as fast as it could for the nearest pine tree. But our adrenaline was up and flowing in full force. Shenzi had a hold of its tail and would not let go. I continued my swinging, connecting the bear on its back with every swing. Only after the bear started to climb a tree and got out of range did I stop. And only after the ground started to disappear did Shenzi finally let go of the tail, hitting branches all the way down. We were both very proud of ourselves for having saved the lunch. Everyone got out of the car and started shouting at both of us. I couldn't understand what the fuss was about. We had saved the meal, and now this. After lunch, my wife took me on a nice quiet walk and explained in detail what all the fuss was about. Something about what we did being dangerous or something like that. Another case of getting the wrong message. Graduation was the happiest day of my life, but it was also a sad day. As I was going back to Africa, I gave Shenzi to the telephone man, who used to play with her every day he came by. She jumped up into the front seat as though she had been sitting there all her life. As she drove away, she just looked straight ahead down the road, in case there might be something interesting to point out to her new master, the telecommunications man. Beautiful. What a madman. Yeah, well, I've only got a few months left till I graduate. Can't wait. Then, yeah, I'll be going back to Africa. Back to Zimbabwe. Alright, lads and ladies, thanks for listening. And sorry it's been so long. Try and keep it more consistent. I just got snowed under. I think the last... Did I record on this new laptop? I don't know. Anyway, my old laptop got broken and I had to get a new, cheaper one. But anyway, it is what it is. Alright. Sleep well. See you tomorrow.